Okay.
Like, that is the problem of having like a former college faculty member making a podcast is like,
So you think you would have been like less wordy had you never been a college faculty member?
no. But
So that's a great
but it
excuse.
was a great career for
But I
me
think
because I
like,
could just talk at people.
but you were probably born wordy.
I was born wordy. Yes.
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 So we can blame anything else, but this is
But
just
like,
you.
I mean, that's I guess why like, podcasting fit, teaching college students fit, because I just got to like talk a lot and then people listened.
Like forced audience?
Well, nobody's forcing anyone to listen to our podcast, but
No. Well, in at school it was a different story.
right. I'm just thankful that people, are tuning into
Yes.
our podcast just because stories like the one we're sharing today, I really want people to know her name and more about her. So we're talking about this woman named Jean Spangler today.
Mm-hmm.
I think you know a little bit about Jean.
Only because you talk about her a lot.
I love her so much.
Yeah, but like I don't know anything personally. I've been purposely not like digging into that, but I do know you mentioned her a lot, and I did know that we were going to do an episode on her.
Okay, so it has arrived. And so this is
Yes.
definitely a
So I do think we're
two-part.
we're venturing into like Hollywood at some point.
Yes, so we're over in Hollywood. Like we actually said in a recent episode that like we talk about Texas a lot, but like I have a feeling we're going to end up talking about California a lot too.
Really.
I mean, it's just like
It's a big state.
it's a big state, lots, of population, that kind of thing. So I think that makes sense. So like we talked about that when we were talking. We just did the Evelyn Throsby
Mm-hmm.
episode, right? And for recap for the people who have not listened to that episode yet, she is a missing woman. Her body was never found. Her killer never confessed. So she's the first case in which it was tried and convicted without a body and without a confession. So she's noteworthy for many reasons,
The
but
first like in the United States ever?
mhm.
Oh, so that was like that's a big thing.
Yeah. So Evelyn, is also in LA. And one of the things that I think is interesting is we're talking about Jean Spangler today. And Jean and Evelyn actually were in LA at the same time. Like Evelyn goes missing later, but Evelyn would have heard about Jean's story.
Really? Do you think they ever would have met?
I don't think so because they're just really two very different types of women
Right.
with different social circles. Like Evelyn is like this wealthy white woman who like doesn't work and she is volunteering in her free time and keeping like this close social circle of like other wealthy women
Mm-hmm.
and men. Jean Spangler, on the other side, is a younger white woman who really wanted to be in Hollywood. So she's like on the actress track in Hollywood. So they're like
Very different.
very different social circles, different circumstances. But yeah, I just was thinking about that. It's like, oh, Evelyn.
At some point she would have known about.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
Jean's story was splashed all over the newspapers. Now, Jean goes missing in 1949. And one of the things that happens to Jean is that her story since then has taken many different tracks. Like, there are a lot of theories, a lot of people coming forward saying, I think my relative had something to do with it. We're not getting too much invested in that in this podcast just because at this point that's all just kind of like floaty
It's like,
stuff, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So instead, this first episode that we're doing on her is really capturing who Jean was before she goes missing. And then the second episode will follow up with all the theories and all that.
Okay. Sounds good. I think like one of the best parts, I think, of what we do too is talking about when we have it available, like those little details about these women.
Yeah. And
Those
like,
are the most fun for me anyway.
yeah, and I think like Jean particular has become like I think people might have heard her name in passing or as soon as I get to one part might make a connection, but really what is lost sight about her is like who she was as a person.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so before we get to her disappearance, you need to understand who Jean was. And that's again the core of this first part. Jean was born on September 2nd, 1923 in Washington State to Cecil Spangler and Florence Morris. Jean was the youngest, coming after Richard, Betsy, and Edward in that order. And you can tell that she was really doted on as the youngest child, like as the youngest child myself. Like,
Mm-hmm.
One of their family photos features the children as adults, and Jean is still labeled as our baby in the photo. And what I think is like kind of wild about their family is that they kind of capture what this new era of mobility in America looked like. It would have been much more common in the preceding decades to marry someone who lived in your community, right? Like you knew them, you grew up with them, or you knew their families, and that's how you met. But Cecil was from Virginia, Florence was from Missouri, and their children were born in Washington State and in California.
So they're all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is like radically different in terms of how we kind of are
Like the
shaping
time.
families.
Yeah.
And while Jean may have been born in Washington, she most definitely grew up in Los Angeles. The family lived in various locations in those early years, renting in places like on Future Street, which is just like the best name,
Hmm?
and Roselawn Place. In those years, it really seemed like Cecil, Jean's father, was finding his way in his careers, and he was working at times as an auto salesman and at other times as a realtor. But Jean knew what she wanted to do, and that was to dance and act. She did, after all, live in a city where movie producers and Hollywood actors were getting their start. It had to be an experience, particularly in the 1930s when she was coming of age, to kind of experience Hollywood at this time.
And they're already living in California at this time
Yep.
too? Yeah, so
Yeah, so
that's like perfect place, perfect time, right?
yeah, so her family kind of moves in when she's like pretty young, and so she just grows up locally in LA. And so she graduated from Franklin High School in 1941. Now, despite her desire to work as a dancer or actress, she quickly got married the following year on June 28th, 1942. It was an evening ceremony at the Hollywood Beverly Christian Church where, surrounded by friends and family, Jean got married to Dexter Benner. He was 22 and she was just 18. I was thinking, like, why this change for Jean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I want to be a dancer. I want to be an actress.
Now I'm getting married.
Now I'm getting married, right? And I'm not sure exactly why because I couldn't find any interviews or talk from either Dexter or Jean at the time. But, like, this is actually a time when a lot of couples were marrying quickly, particularly with the threat of World War II, right?
Okay.
So before went overseas, or drafted or whatever, they would marry quickly, right? So Dexter had actually filled out his draft form the previous year in 1941, so that like potential was there for him.
So it might not have even meant to be just like an actual true like couple.
Yeah,
Like
well, yeah, I think
kind
sometimes
of like to help him out on that, like morale wise, or I don't know.
sometimes that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes like, oh, we've been dating for a short amount of time and then people would get married
Mm-hmm.
because yeah, this thing was about to happen,
Yeah,
right?
it just seems like such a like I can't imagine being in like a weird time like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, unfortunately, their relationship was tumultuous from the start. Just 6 months after their marriage, she filed for divorce from him on January 23rd, 1943. And in this paperwork, she said that she separated from him about 2 weeks before on January 15th.
Do we know why?
Well, a little bit. This divorce request actually makes the LA papers, which seems a bit unusual because neither of them is particularly noteworthy,
Hmm.
right? He is described as an aircraft production executive, which I think actually might have been a bit of a stretch. She was listed as a film actress, magazine cover girl, and former Powers model.
So was she in movies at this point?
Well, sort of. Like, one thing we know about Jean's work is that it was largely uncredited work. We know some of the films she was in, but it's likely that if she was in films during this particular period, this part of her life, we don't know those because it wasn't documented.
Okay.
But the papers certainly called her
Yeah, I wonder why
a
would they
film
put them in the
actress.
paper?
Yeah.
Just yeah, they kind of fluffed up that story.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, today, California is a no-fault divorce state, meaning you don't have to state a reason to ask for a divorce. But that wasn't the case back in 1943. And when Jean requested this divorce, she cited cruelty in her divorce request. But she wasn't specific about what that meant. And we often talk about divorce rates today, but back in the World War II era, divorce rates actually skyrocketed, likely fueled by all those people realizing, hey, this person I married isn't the right one.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
When you rush into things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it wasn't meant to be.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Also, 18.
She's a baby.
These are babies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's unclear what happens in the divorce process because that was not covered in the newspapers. But what we do know is she doesn't actually get divorced. Jean and Dexter continue to have a complicated relationship. And in the summer of 1943, Jean becomes pregnant with Dexter's child, and Christine, their daughter, is born the following year on April 22nd, 1944, in Los Angeles. Despite having a whole baby and a wife, when Dexter enlists in the U.S. Army in September of that year, he lists himself as single.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And without dependents.
Oh.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So clearly at this point, there's some schism between the two of them. Like things are not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So legally, he lied on that
He
form.
absolutely lied because, yeah, he has both a wife and
a baby.
And a baby. That's 2 dependents.
Mm-hmm. Now, during the war years, essentially the entirety of the men in the Spangler family, Jean's family, are also enlisted. Both of Jean's brothers and her father serve. So it's really the women taking care of things, women taking care of each other back on the home front. And like many families, they were not immune to the tragedies of the war. During this time on June 1st, 1945, Jean's brother Edward was on a B-29 Superfortress that was nicknamed Big Poison Second Dose.
That's a big... So they had a big poison first dose as well?
Yes.
Okay.
And he was acting as the right-wing gunner. Now, they took off from Manila, and after a rendezvous point near Japan, there was low visibility, and Edward's plane's wing hit a neighboring plane, causing both planes to essentially spin out. All the men on board of both planes were lost, and their bodies were never recovered. So I'm mentioning this specifically because it's often said later on that Jean is living with her brother Edward, but that's an error in reporting. He had passed away in 1945.
So he was never recovered either. So essentially this family lost 2 children?
Yes.
Never to be found?
Yes.
In separate incidences. That's kind of unbelievable in a way, but I guess it happens.
Yeah, right? So, this was something that was happening in World War II, and we don't often think about them or talk about them as disappearances, but
they are essentially on the scheme of how we address it.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where it's well, we know what happened, but we don't get to bury that person or recognize them.
Right.
We'll be back in a moment. Now, in addition to this, we also know that at some point her father is wounded and he's sent to Sawtell, which is a veterans home for disabled veterans. And though this was located in Los Angeles, he no longer lived with his family either.
Okay.
And so for Jean, even though she's experiencing this trauma and raising her daughter while her husband is away, it seems that Jean is also having at least one affair while her husband is gone. He would later say that the end of the marriage happened when he came home and found another man's shirts in his closet. He said they belonged to an Army lieutenant named Scott that Jean was having an affair with.
But technically, on paper,
Right.
he's single, so...
Yeah.
Did she ever really cheat on him?
Well, I think it's interesting because it's obviously something was going on before you two.
Right.
Before he left, right?
Mm-hmm.
He also, though, claims that while they were married, Jean went to Nevada and married someone else, and that this marriage was later annulled. I mean, I guess, but
would it even need to be
annulled? Wasn't
yeah.
even right.
Yeah.
Now, I can't find any documentation in my initial search to back this up, but what is very clear is that these two continue to have conflict with one another.
Yeah.
Now, the couple finally divorces in 1946. In an unusual move, Dexter was actually given custody of their daughter, Christine. Now, Jean had been painted as someone who should not be responsible for raising her own daughter, and Dexter alleged that Jean preferred parties to priorities. His words.
But he had just like left her with the daughter. And
Yeah.
now she can't do it.
Right. Well, yeah. I get the sense that some of Dexter's ongoing conflict with Jean is that he really expected her to stay at home raising their kid, and she wanted a different life.
She wants her career. Yeah.
Right. And so to him, like, I think he's saying parties, like, did Jean go out? Probably, but also he just wasn't necessarily supportive of her, like, career aspirations, right?
Right. And I think as a dancer and actress at that point in time, people would be like, that's just partying.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, like, these types of character assassinations from Dexter would actually become quite common and feature prominently in Jean's life. And obviously, there aren't really documents to substantiate some of his allegations, but what I do know is that Jean, after her divorce, starts to make some progress in her career. In October 1946, for instance, she starred with the comedian Pink Lee in a review called Laughs, spelled Laffs, with Pinky at the Florentine Gardens as one of the dancers. Now, Florentine Gardens still exists today. If you're in LA, you can actually go there. But basically, in the 1940s, it had gained popularity as they switched to, and I quote, scantily clad chorus girls as part of the entertainment. And Jean and another dancer, Grace Young, were used in newspapers advertising this act. Working at Florentine Gardens as part of various reviews wasn't Jean's only work at the time. She also worked in costuming for other venues like the Pacific Studio Theater. I get the sense that she was a bit player, primarily working in uncredited roles in extras in television and film. So that's kind of how she's making her way. Now, in August 1948, Jean is back in the papers again, but not exactly for the breakthrough Hollywood career she's hoping for. Instead, it's for a custody battle she's having with Dexter over Christine. Now, remember, Dexter had been given custody of Christine in 1946 when Dexter and Jean divorced, and at that time, Jean was supposed to have visitation rights. But between 1946 and 1948, Dexter and his new wife, Lynn, had denied Jean visitation 23 times. Allegedly, he even threatened Jean, saying that he'd fix it so you'll never get to see her.
Wow. Okay. So were they in the paper just as like a regular custody battle, or were they actually talking about these things that Dexter's doing?
So some of this doesn't make the papers at the time, right? What does make the papers is like this is going on. And it's also how they kind of categorize Jean in this custody dispute. So at this point, Jean's been categorized by Dexter as like irresponsible and like a career woman versus, you know.
So it's being put on her.
Yeah.
So he's like threatening her, not letting her see her own kid.
Mm-hmm.
But in the papers, they're making her look bad?
Yeah, so she generally tends to look not that great in the papers. So when she goes for this custody of Christine, right, what happens is they hire a court-appointed investigator called Carolyn Burns, and she's assigned to this case. Now, Carolyn Burns actually recommends that Christine stay with Dexter and Lynn. Burns specifically pointed out in her report that Jean was still fixated on her theater career and was, and this is her words, known to her friends and enemies as a glamour girl.
Okay, so we're not on board with like her trying to have a career and a family.
Right. So, you know, it's Dexter is saying this court-appointed investigator is saying that she's basically an inappropriate mom. Now, this was not an assessment that Jean fought against during this custody hearing. She did come forward and say that she had, yes, had some indiscretions in the past, but that she was now settled down and could follow her dancing career while maintaining a home for her daughter. Now, Dexter says basically through his lawyer that her lifestyle had not actually changed at all, meaning that she hadn't settled down, but ultimately the judge actually agreed with Jean.
Good.
Judge Albert Ross said that Christine's place was with her mother and that any questionable conduct on Jean's part was now buried in the past. He also essentially said it's not a crime to be glamorous, nor did it make her a bad mother.
Okay. Judge Albert Ross is a good guy.
Yeah, it's like this categorization of Jean. It's kind of like saying, hey, because you're,
Glamorous, you
glamorous,
can't be a good mother.
she's incredibly pretty. Jean is.
Right.
Right.
But I mean, it's good for this judge at, in the 40s to be able to recognize that you can do two things
Yes.
that don't seem to coincide, but
hey, you can be an actress and a
and
mom.
a mom. Oh my God. You can
Yeah.
be glamorous and a mom. Yeah.
Yeah. So once again, custody of Christine changed hands and Jean was given primary custody, but this time with actually a few caveats. First, Dexter would have the right to have Christine with him on alternate weekends. Second, Jean could not have Christine perform in dance or film publicly until she was at least 12 years old. And third, that Jean's own career aspirations would have to be curtailed. She would have to report any time that she wanted to leave the state for filming purposes to her lawyer, who would then have to approve of it.
So she's got primary custody now.
Yeah, so she has primary custody with some rules.
He gets like every second weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And then a few rules that, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good.
Yeah. So now, according to the lawyer, as has Han, Jean followed these rules. He said that he always heard from her prior to her leaving town for a role. And in 1948 through 1949, it seems like she was in regular demand for some uncredited film roles. So she was checking in with him. He was approving those when necessary. Now, her first real uncredited role that we know about, and I want to make clear, she had been in things before, but this is like the next level of uncredited.
Okay.
Right. Was in The Miracle of the Bells, starring Frank Sinatra, that was released in 1948. Jean played an extra in church for this film. Next was a Three Stooges short called Mummy's Dummies, where her character was just labeled Pretty Girl.
All of that sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
Mummy's Dummies, Pretty Girl.
Pretty Girl. Which it's really important to note that this is really where Jean's career is at this point. Unnamed characters, often as a dancer. So she was a chorus girl in When My Baby Smiles at Me, a dancer in Chicken Every Sunday, a hula dancer in Young Man with a Horn, starring Kirk Douglas, a showgirl in Wabash Avenue, and a nightclub patron in The Petty Girl, starring Robert Cummings.
Some of these names. Chicken Every Sunday.
Yeah.
Young Man with a Horn.
Now, the custody lawyer, Hans, said that in the month leading up to her disappearance, she had been away for a movie job in Dallas, Texas. Now, I couldn't figure out which film this was for, specifically since the ones I listed don't seem to have been filmed in Texas, but he said she always followed the rules when it came to the custody agreement, checking in before she left. In October of 1949, Jean and Christine were living with Jean's mother, Florence, and Jean's sister-in-law, Sophie, and Sophie's child. Sophie was the one who was married to Jean's brother, Edward, the one who died in 1945. Okay, so it's like a household of women.
Yes.
They all lived in the Park La Brea neighborhood of Los Angeles on Colgate Avenue. Now, this was built as a garden-style apartment community in the 1940s, and I think I could do like a whole episode about this neighborhood itself, but it was really considered innovative at the time.
Did you look at pictures of it?
I, of course, did.
And?
It's so cute.
Is it cute?
Yeah. And then, God, just the way that it's, set up, the streets, and it's so cute. Now, leading up to the day of her disappearance, Jean's mother, Florence, had gone to Lexington, Kentucky, where Jean's oldest brother, Richard, lived. Richard and his wife were expecting their first child, and they wanted Florence there for the birth and to kind of help out in the days after. So while Florence was gone, on Thursday, October 6th, Jean got a call from Allied Artistries saying that she was needed for a film shoot on the 10th in Big Bear, California. They would later say that she seemed excited for the job when they spoke to her that day.
The way you're talking, it feels like this is nearing the end of Jean's story.
Yes. Well, this part of Jean's story. Now, so Jean did... You're getting nervous over there.
Yeah, I am. I'm like, what's going to happen? Well, I mean, I know she...
Yeah.
I should know at this point.
That once we start getting really specific. Yeah. So Jean did what she was supposed to do. She called the lawyer Han and cleared this trip with him. He would later say that the same thing about Jean, that she seemed upbeat and happy, that she made clear how much she loved Christine and how happy she was to be living with Christine once again. And after their chat, Han cleared her for travel to Big Bear. On Friday evening, October 7th, Jean came down the stairs at the Park La Brea home dressed in dark green pants, a wool blouse, and a white sports jacket, and asked Sophie how she looked. Sophie was at the kitchen table with her child and with Christine, who wasn't feeling well that night. She had a cold. Sophie says that Jean smiled at her, and then Christine asked Jean where she was going. Now, there are two slightly different versions of what happens next. Both come from Sophie, but come at different times. So,
you're going to tell us both?
Yes.
Okay.
So the first time that Sophie talks about this, she says that Jean just says that she's going to work when she's asked where she's going.
Okay.
And in the second version that Sophie relates later, Sophie says that when she says this, when Jean says this, she winks at Sophie after saying that she's going to work.
Okay, so when she's actually going to work and when she's going to work, wink, wink.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. So I'm guessing, what they're saying here is that she didn't want to say whatever she was doing in front of the children.
But it wasn't working in the second scenario. So that's such a small thing.
Yes.
And we've talked about how slippery memory can be before, and how this is basically just a story being told over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
So there's never going to be an answer.
No. So it's either she is going to work or she's wink, wink,
wink,
going
wink
to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We will never know.
No. And that slight difference really changes what we think might have happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So to be clear, Jean did actually tend to work evening and night shoots. She did that sometimes. So her working in the evening wasn't unusual. Sophie said that as a bit player, Jean would work in television and film, and that when she was called in for work, it wouldn't always be clear how long she would be gone for. Sometimes she would work for just an hour or two, sometimes a longer day. Sophie says that Jean left their home at 5:30 p.m. She says she's not sure exactly how Jean left because she was focused on the children. She said that sometimes Jean would call a cab, sometimes take a bus, and sometimes a friend would pick her up. So
no, Jean didn't say oh, this is how I'm getting there.
No. She just walked out the door, and Sophie's not certain how she just left that area. At around 7:30 p.m. that night, Jean called the apartment to check on her daughter and to tell Sophie that she would be doing a full 8-hour shift that night, so not to expect her home until the next morning. And so I'll just add here, if Jean wasn't going to work, the wink, wink.
Right.
When she called Sophie, why didn't she just make clear where she was going, right?
Right, because at this point she's on the phone with her.
Yeah, so the kids wouldn't hear. So, why wouldn't she just say?
Right. Why keep the story going?
And wouldn't it be weird if she had winked at Sophie and then she's telling her I'm staying for a full work shift?
Yeah, that sounds like it doesn't match.
Right. It doesn't make sense to me. Now, the next morning on Saturday, Dexter arrived for his weekend with Christine and then took her with him to his home. Honestly, it feels like it would be unusual for Jean not to be there to say goodbye to Christine, but Dexter said that he hadn't actually spoken to or seen Jean in months at that point. So maybe it actually wasn't unusual for the two to avoid one another at this point. And it's around then that Sophie starts getting concerned. If Jean had worked an 8-hour shift, she should have been home. Sophie said that she waited as long as possible before calling the police and reporting her missing. Now, what Sophie didn't know at the time is that Jean's story would become almost legendary in Hollywood, a cautionary tale of fame that gets tangled up in stories of affairs, illegal abortions, and even serial killers.
We are now going to listen to Amy's poem, A Body in Motion, read by Sara Tomko. Sara is a film and television actress based in LA and CEO of In the Pocket Productions. She is most notably known as series regular Asta 12 Trees in the hit show Resident Alien, which is produced by Amblin and NBCU. Her career began in experimental theater and musicals in Virginia and Ohio, later moving to Los Angeles to pursue film and TV. She is an actor, producer, poet, singer, and mental health advocate.
The Body in Motion. Jean Spangler, 27, missing since October 7, 1949, from Los Angeles, California. 1. In the dance numbers, it is all lighting and feathers. That's how they trick the eye. The girls have yet to hit puberty, their hips just bone, their hair baby soft. Under hot overheads, they hit their marks in the chorus line over and over. Kicks high, heads tilted, smiles, pasted cutouts. Their dreams are spangled things. In the books, they are just numbers, height and weight duly recorded. But on stage, with their feet clipping against the boards, they are spiritual beings, the vibration of matter in air. 2. In the back room clouded with face powder, the woman with snow-white looks has stopped telling her age, or that she birthed a daughter, holds another inside of her. She keeps moving, embodies change. Walking the streets, she mirrors those in front of her, constructs a shadow dance of limbs and torso twists. The choreography is always new. But on her way to remove part of herself, she falls into her own steps. In her greatest act, she performs the dance of grieving. She becomes a Maenad.
For more information about our show or to check out other shows on the network, please visit evergreenpodcast.com. Bye, Vanessa.
Bye, Amy.